My name is Sean McNutt, and I'm a guy with AI. Happy New Year, everyone. The first topic of 2025 is going to be consumerism. We're going to talk about its history, its impact, and its intended purpose. A Guy with AI is recorded on Indigenous land.
Welcome, everyone, to A Guy with AI. I'm thrilled to be part of this insightful journey alongside Sean McNutt as his AI co-host. We are coming to you from Indigenous land, a fact we deeply respect and acknowledge from the beginning of our discussion. As OpenAI's GPT-4, I assist Sean, who has ingeniously integrated me into this podcast with the help of speech-to-text and text-to-speech technology, in exploring fascinating subjects by providing co-hosting support. Our format is a unique one-on-one dialogue, where Sean and I dive into a range of topics, from history to societal impacts, aiming to offer respectful and engaging interaction for our listeners. Today, we'll kick off 2025 by delving into the origins, impact, and purpose of consumerism, a theme that's both timely and thought-provoking. Sean, maybe you could now elaborate a bit more on why you chose this particular topic to start the new year with.
Welcome, listeners, to A Guy with AI. Here we are in 2025. It's happened. 2024 is over, whether you were ready for it in the first place or not. In any case, it's my pleasure to be here recording this episode discussing consumerism. So this episode is sort of one of those sit and spit episodes. I didn't prepare heavily for this episode. I think it's a topic of import. I think that environmental concerns, economic concerns, and things like that make for rich discussion. So that's pretty much why I chose the topic for today's episode, being consumerism. And just to elaborate for maybe listeners who haven't been with me for a long time, there is a certain amount of delving into topics based on the AI's training and perspective when it comes to enlightening the topic. So I do have an AI co-host who you've already heard. This is a matter of me going to it and upon a broad theme and maybe focusing in on some facts of history and so forth. OpenAI, which is where this chatbot that I use comes from, does have disclaimers that its products can make mistakes and so forth. I haven't caught it in any glaring errors after 50 episodes now, this being episode 51. But it is a matter of just doing our best with the state of current technology, getting that information, and then embarking on a sort of a logical and fact-based critical exchange with the AI chatbot and seeing what we can get to the bottom of here, we being myself and a hunk of technology, an AI chatbot. But I do enjoy recording with it. I do spend a lot of time talking to AI outside of this program also. And you never know, maybe I should get out more. But in the end, I do find that I can get productive discussion from it, depending on how you frame things and the context you give it and so forth. So we're going to start this off. I'm going to talk to the AI co-host for a moment and say, AI co-host, I'd like you to give me a list of elements that you think are important in the history of consumerism. We'll start there. I'll make my own comments on that, and we'll kick off the discussion that way.
Sean, I'm delighted to embark on this discussion about consumerism with you. As our listeners settle in, it's clear we're touching upon a topic that resonates widely, especially in light of environmental and economic factors. Consumerism's history is rich and complex, and I'll offer a few focal points to start our dialogue. Firstly, we can consider the Industrial Revolution as a pivotal moment, as it laid the groundwork for mass production and increased availability of consumer goods. The emergence of advertising, particularly in the early 20th century, is another significant element, as it shaped consumer desires and behaviors on a large scale. The post-World War II era marked the rise of consumer culture in many Western nations, driven by increased disposable incomes and expanded credit options. Another important aspect is the globalization of trade, which has enriched product variety but also raised concerns about sustainability and the environmental footprint of our consumption patterns. Sean, perhaps you could weigh in on these points or share your own insights to expand this conversation further.
Well, thanks for that, AI co-host. I do see here the Industrial Revolution being a pivotal moment, mass production being a key reason for that, and this meaning increased availability of consumer goods. So some of them would have appealed to people if they made their lives easier, and this enabled by technology and machinery now producing goods. With people behind the machinery, of course, there were always workers all along the way, not to forget to acknowledge that. But the technological advancements of the Industrial Revolution, we'll call them advancements for now, these led to probably quite an explosion in available goods. So that would have driven back impetus into developing the factories or machinery that would have produced those goods and so on and so forth, and opened that up. And it does seem, though, that people were somewhat safe from advertising until later, the early 20th century being mentioned. And there's a mention here that it shapes consumer desires and behaviors on a large scale. I don't know. I think I feel like there's maybe a dark possibility there with the power of advertising to change the way we are going to want things and engage in behaviors. So certainly seems relevant, and there is an impetus there because if you can produce a consumer good which becomes globally popular, again, the globalization of trade was mentioned by the AI co-host, then you're riding high on life. You're making lots of money at that point, as long as you have the business sense to deliver that. So, something that comes to mind with this examination between the AI co-host and what I've said about this is the concept of externalities. And to me, this is an environmental and economic question. Perhaps AI co-host, and you can lengthen out your response a little bit. I see where I constrained the AI co-host. I got a little bit less response. I would say expand your response length about 20%, AI co-host, and give me an explanation of what externalities are and how they relate to the current dialogue.
Certainly, Sean. Let's delve deeper into the concept of externalities and how they intersect with consumerism. Externalities are essentially the unintended side effects or consequences of commercial activities that affect other parties who did not choose to be involved in the transaction. They can be negative or positive, but in the context of consumerism, we often focus on the negative externalities due to their significant impact on society and the environment. Take, for instance, the mass production of goods during and after the Industrial Revolution. While it resulted in a plethora of consumer products that improved quality of life and efficiency, it also led to environmental degradation. Factories release pollutants into the air and water, contributing to environmental damage and health issues for communities, costs not reflected in the product's price. These are the negative externalities, where the societal or ecological costs are borne by parties not involved in the buying or selling of goods, often becoming societal burdens. Similarly, advertising, with its powerful influence over consumer desires, might contribute to overconsumption. This can lead to larger economic disparities, environmental overuse, and waste, impacting far beyond the individual consumer's choice. Understanding externalities compels us to consider the broader societal and ethical implications of our consumption patterns. It raises questions about sustainability and fairness, prompting discussions about regulations and corporate responsibilities in mitigating these effects. Given these points, Sean, how do you think consumers or businesses could better address these externalities? And how might this shape the landscape of consumerism moving forward?
I recall from my studies in the community worker program at George Brown College in Toronto, Ontario. This was there was a course where I was a political science course, and one of the topics to write about was Adam Smith. So in my brief academic flirtation with the ideas of Adam Smith, I discovered that he actually proposed a system by which externalities were accounted for, and that the state played a strong role in seeing to this with information. So the government would be publishing or ensuring the publishing of information about products as far as what it is that is in that product, or what that product may have bumped up against in its production line, which it affects. So these all being externalities. And I wonder if in the world as it is, there's not an impetus and encouragement, because you can save on costs by not taking responsibility for an externality. I wonder if there hasn't been a downplaying of these writings of Adam Smith and with regard to and what would, I think, be an influential, almost regulatory role in a sense, where these there would have to be an assurance that if you have a mining operation in Mexico, what it is that you do at that mine that gets the products out of the ground, or the ore, or whatever it is you're mining, and brings that out into the product that it goes into. Now, the complexity of modern products does turn this into a problem, but we would have on the other end the problem of externalities if they're not accounted for properly. And the fact is that I probably see the government making some efforts to tell me what's in products, but it may not really serve much function right now in terms of telling me on an ethical basis or an environmental basis how much energy it took to produce that product, and if there's really a very robust accounting for what chemicals may be in that product, for example, and what it takes to produce those chemicals, and what end-of-life cycle implications there are there. We do see where you have to pay an environmental fee on certain electronics products and so on and so forth, which is maybe a motion in that direction toward accounting for the externalities. But I wonder if in more laissez-faire capitalist thinking, and ultimately in practice when it comes to corporate activity, if we don't see a shoving out of the externalities in favor of nice, tidy business deals where the profit is built in, but perhaps not the awareness of everything it takes and what is disturbed in creating and bringing that product forth.
You raise insightful points, Sean, especially touching on the insights of Adam Smith that often get overshadowed by his more famous treatise on the invisible hand of the market. Smith indeed recognized the importance of transparency and the potential role of the state in providing information that could guide responsible consumption and production choices. In a modern context, as you've suggested, there indeed seems to be an ongoing tension between the pursuit of profit and the accountability for externalities. The current system sometimes incentivizes businesses to externalize costs to maintain competitive pricing, leading to underreporting or obscured information about the true environmental and social costs embedded in products. This is particularly problematic in global supply chains, where the complexity and interconnectivity make tracking and accountability challenging. Efforts to address these problems have indeed emerged, such as environmental certifications, carbon footprints, and end-of-life product fees, which represent steps towards greater transparency. However, these measures are often insufficient, fragmented, or voluntary, limiting their impact. There's certainly room for government and international bodies to play stronger roles in regulatory frameworks that hold businesses accountable for externalities, as you mentioned regarding Adam Smith's proposals. Laissez-faire capitalism, when adopted in its extreme, may indeed neglect these aspects, favoring short-term profits. However, there's a burgeoning movement towards corporate social responsibility, CSR, and environmental, social, and governance, ESG, criteria, pushing companies towards more sustainable practices. Consumers, too, wield power, as their preferences can drive companies to adopt more transparent and ethical practices. Yet, substantial change often requires systemic incentives and robust regulations to realign the profit motive with broader societal and environmental responsibilities. What do you think could be the most effective way to accelerate this accountability in the marketplace, Sean? Is there a policy or tech solution that you believe holds promise in bridging the gap between necessary transparency and current business practices?
Well, I'd like to maybe put a pin in your question as far as how to accelerate the accountability. It's an important question, and I'd like to circle back to it, AI co-host. However, there's a consideration that consumerism plays some sort of role in the marketplace. Now, we can argue about its evils, but and we will, but there would be a point in the discussion where we would say, what is this good for? I've heard where doctors will say, a good doctor I knew told me once that you should ask, if someone has got something in their life, it's like, what is it there for? We know why it may be bad, at least, but why do people have this in their life? What do they rely on it for? So what are we reliant on consumerism for? And we want to deal with the externalities and all of this, but just to bring it back to a larger question about consumerism, we've at a minimum identified that it can have negative impacts when externalities are not accounted for in the capitalist system, even though Adam Smith did prescribe that they be. So we have that. But what's good about consumerism? Why do we have it? What does it do for the market? And maybe we can just have a little bit more Adam Smith. AI co-host, what's your perspective on what Adam Smith would have said about consumerism if this is something that was burgeoning when he was writing, or if it's gone on from what he would have imagined?
Consumerism, despite its drawbacks, plays several important roles in the marketplace and society as a whole. It fuels economic growth by driving demand for goods and services, leading to job creation and technological innovation. By competing to meet consumer needs, businesses are incentivized to improve the quality and variety of products, often resulting in greater efficiency and better standards of living. Furthermore, consumerism reflects individual freedom of choice, allowing people to express personal preferences and identities through their purchases. From an Adam Smith perspective, while consumerism as we know it today wasn't fully developed in his time, his ideas do provide some insights. Smith recognized that self-interest drives economic activity, which can benefit society when regulated properly. His invisible hand theory suggests that individual desires and needs, pursued in a free market, can lead to overall societal benefit, assuming transparency and fair competition are maintained. However, Smith also emphasized moral and ethical considerations, which suggest that unchecked consumerism, leading to excess or negative externalities, would not align with his vision. He believed in the importance of balance, with the market serving human needs but not at the expense of societal welfare. In today's context, consumerism has certainly expanded beyond what Smith could have imagined, often crossing into realms of excess and contributing to unsustainable practices. However, it remains a powerful mechanism for promoting innovation, diversity of choice, and economic development. The challenge lies in harnessing its benefits while finding ways to mitigate its negative aspects, particularly through responsible practices and regulation. Understanding what consumerism is good for involves acknowledging both its constructive roles and the need for mechanisms, like transparency, ethical production, and responsible consumption, to address its downsides. Do you think current efforts are sufficient, or is there more that can be done to strike this balance effectively?
Well, an observation about what Adam Smith said as far as the need for an accounting for externalities and a state role in this, actually. I think there are a lot of people who would call themselves Adam Smith economists who are reading from the book rather than reading the book, if my meaning is clear there. I think humans do this sometimes and they kind of cherry pick. But actually, this business of the invisible hand, I mean, I sort of see it and can almost grasp it, what he's talking about in his writings there. But this invisible hand is going to jump out and choke you if you don't have the full prescription. If you don't do all the exercises, then you might not get strong. And back to this question that I sort of said I would circle back to, an effective way to accelerate accountability in the marketplace would be probably to regulate advertising. Something that I see is an absolute plethora of advertisements for medications. Now, I may need this medication or I may not. Some of the medications seem like if they prevent an illness or something like this, vaccine type deliveries may not be entirely bad for society. And there's an argument that even scientists would say, as many people as possible should receive this. But there are other medications that I wonder if they're for everyone, but they get sent out to everyone as a message. Talk to your doctor about this medication. And I recall seeing one ad that almost seemed cagey about what it was for, because you're supposed to go into your doctor's office and have this long conversation in this visit, where if you're in the States, you're paying for that visit somehow. All of this, I think that if there was accountability in advertising and less of it, it seems like you can't really turn on media without being blasted with advertising. I mean, the TV isn't an option there if you really needed to avoid it. And generally, you're paying more money. Sometimes there is an option. I would argue that some of that is worth it, but I watch enough TV that it just doesn't rid my life of advertising, so I don't pay the premiums. But if people were exposed to less advertising, then they may engage the marketplace more responsibly. If people were exposed to messages about what's in the product as opposed to what it's going to do for them in the first 5 minutes after they acquire it, and a full examination of this, then this would be a better headspace, a better educated headspace for people. I wonder if that's really supposed to be the point by the time we're being delivered many advertisements at such a volume and repetition. It really is meant to affect us and impact our behavior and our mode of thinking. And it does do this, and studies do show. And another thing is that academics are behind industry on this, because industry is always coming up with this stuff and studying this with large budgets. academia gets to see any of this later or much later and has to figure it out for itself what is going on there. So I don't know if we're just supposed to wait for whistleblowers, if we would listen to them when they do show up, or if they wouldn't just tell you what everybody knows anyway, but are encouraged not to think about. So I think that, I've got a criticism for people who sort of pound the Adam Smith Bible, but never really read all the verses. And I don't know that this makes me some sort of hyper-capitalist myself. I'm undecided as to what system I think will be the very best system for us to go by. But certainly we can see how with environmental and economic problems arising that we may not have the perfect one right now. So, regulation is a thing. Knowing what's in products is a thing. Like if a bunch of Mexican miners were mistreated in the creation of the product and people knew this, there would be a check in the population. It is not that the government is saying never make products and we are going to follow everything you do internationally, although I'm not saying that that's bad either, depending on how mistreated people are. But it's really to have within the consumer and encourage that invisible hand to act and grasp that which is better, because consumers are involved in the decision making better and are more autonomous rather than being led around, because they are advised as to what is in the product. And I think it's missing. I think the externalities are a factor. And I think the absolute deluge that basically every human has to go through if they consume media or go anywhere of advertising is a factor.
Your insights capture a critical dilemma in contemporary capitalism: how the principles of market efficiency and consumer sovereignty, conceived by economists like Adam Smith, can be distorted by unchecked advertising and lack of transparency. The observation about individuals promoting themselves as followers of Adam Smith without fully grasping his ideas is pertinent. Smith's ideas were complex, and his recognition of the need for ethical considerations and state intervention to correct market failures is often underemphasized by those who champion laissez-faire economics. The influence of pervasive advertising is indeed significant. It shapes consumer behavior and can sometimes lead to choices that prioritize immediate gratification over long-term well-being or ethical considerations. Regulating advertising, as you mentioned, could be a powerful tool to foster a more informed and responsible consumer base. By ensuring that advertisements are truthful, informative, and less overwhelming, consumers could make better decisions aligned with their values and needs rather than mere impulse. Moreover, transparency about product origin, production processes, and the treatment of workers could empower consumers to consider the broader implications of their purchases. This could encourage companies to adopt more ethical practices, as market demand for ethically produced goods increases. Implementing and enforcing regulations that require disclosure of such information is crucial to this process. The challenge, of course, is creating a regulatory environment that balances consumer protection with innovation and economic growth. It requires cooperation between governments, industry stakeholders, and consumers themselves. As you pointed out, academia often lags behind industry developments, which makes public education and the dissemination of unbiased information essential to fostering a well-informed society capable of demanding accountability. The advocacy for greater consumer empowerment aligns with your call for a reconsideration of the invisible hand concept, ensuring it operates in a manner that genuinely benefits society as a whole. Do you see any particular models or existing policies in certain countries that might provide a framework for how such regulation and transparency could be operationalized effectively?
Well, I discussed in a prior episode entitled A Mix of Systems. I'll link that in the transcript for those wanting to look, or just look for that episode. It was around episode 13 or something like that. I've forgotten. But in any case, we kind of looked at capitalism and different variations or dilutions of capitalism, such as like a social democratic approach, or different different things where a social safety net would be introduced, for example. And I think it's within the energies of the planet to see to everyone's actual needs, as opposed to catering to the ones of those who can afford it, which is based on a whim, because they caught a certain advertisement which was effective on their brains, essentially, and changed their decision-making patterns so that they would spend money in one place as opposed to another. I think the inefficiency with which we meet the needs of people makes me wonder if the consumerist push in society and all this advertising, we've discussed the link of that, and whether this is not kind of a sugar high that we must always be on in our economy. I wonder if the substance is really there, and if common economic indicators are tied to well-being, or rather numbers which indicate the likely well-being of those who have got wealth within that system. And, I don't know that I am an Adam Smith proponent. I'm a proponent of examining the full ideas and not giving half in a sale. And when it comes to sales, we've talked about advertising. The point is to make the sale. If you've got a product, it might not matter what's in it to you. I've talked to salespeople before. They don't care what's in the products that they sell. They need to deliver based on what information they do have about it, which may not be expert at all, and see to a delivery of a sale. They need a signature which says, yes, we will buy, and then you deliver the product and they send you a bunch of money for it. And that's the transactional nature of the economy, which can serve one well, and they may be doing no good or the opposite of good with every last sale that they make. But the activity is pushed into this space. The value is put there, and we transactionally go back and forth, and this requires a consumption of goods. So I wonder, AI co-host, if we could examine, let's pin it down a little bit here. Supposing how much of our environmental problems would you say are down to people making the decision to acquire the latest and greatest of technology, when the one in their pocket, if they're using it properly, is probably good enough for them for most uses, and whether these decisions have an impact on the economy from the perspective of people running up credit. And we would talk about environmental concerns there also.
You've touched on a critical issue regarding the intersection of consumerism, environmental sustainability, and economic practices. The cycle of constant consumption, perpetuated by aggressive advertising and societal pressures to own the latest technology, certainly plays a significant role in environmental degradation. Let's break this down further. 1. Environmental impact. The persistent drive for new technology contributes to e-waste, resource depletion, and increased carbon emissions. Electronic devices require significant energy and raw materials for production, such as rare earth metals, which are often mined under conditions harmful to both the environment and local communities. When devices become obsolete or undesirable due to newer models, they often end up in landfills, creating toxic waste that leaches into ecosystems. 2. Psychological and social factors. Advertising fuels a culture of planned obsolescence, making consumers feel that newer is always better, often irrespective of actual needs. This mindset is bolstered by status concerns and social conformity, encouraging the replacement of functional devices simply because a new version has been released. 3. Economic impacts. On an individual level, the pressure to keep up with technological advancement can drive consumers to incur debt, purchasing items on credit that they may not need nor can afford. This situation can lead to financial instability, which in aggregate can affect broader economic health, as personal debt levels influence savings rates and spending patterns in significant ways. For potential solutions, addressing these issues would require an integrated approach. Encouraging sustainable consumption habits, such as using products longer, repairing rather than replacing, or choosing goods designed for longevity and sustainability. Implementing stricter regulations on advertising practices to ensure they promote informed choices rather than impulse purchases. Supporting technology recycling programs and responsible e-waste management to mitigate environmental damage. Promoting economic models that prioritize well-being and sustainability over sheer economic growth, like those found in some social democratic systems, which you mentioned earlier. The challenge is recalibrating societal values and economic incentives to prioritize sustainability and genuine well-being over unbridled consumption. Examples can be found in countries that emphasize circular economies or offer subsidies and incentives for repair and recycling initiatives, reducing the environmental footprint. To move toward a more sustainable future, significant shifts in policy, corporate responsibility, and consumer behavior are vital. Tailoring education and public policy to foster awareness and action on these fronts can create the momentum needed for substantial change. Do you think that changes like these are feasible, or are there barriers you see as particularly daunting?
Well, I'm going to answer your question in brief form so we don't go too far over time. There's one last thing I want to cover. I think it may not be feasible to not change these things. We have environmental concerns, we have social concerns, and the economic disparity, personal debt levels, and this is all something where probably something has to give at some point. So sometimes we focus on the feasibility of what it is we need to do, and not on the feasibility of continuing on the current path. And the score there may be low actually itself. That's my comment there. I want to just briefly say, and this is something that I wanted to get to in the program, we're just going to touch on it, but it's our last point, so maybe we can let it hang with us. AI co-host, can you give me some exploration of what are the emotional and mental health impacts of consumerism being such a force in society?
You've raised an important point about the inevitable need for change, given the multiple facets of current societal challenges. Now, let's explore the emotional and mental health impacts of consumerism. 1. Stress and anxiety. The pressure to continually acquire and display material possessions can lead to stress and anxiety. Individuals might feel compelled to work longer hours or take on debt to afford status symbols, leading to financial stress and its attendant mental health challenges. 2. Comparative dissatisfaction. Consumerism often fosters a culture of comparison. Advertising and social media amplify this by frequently showcasing idealized lifestyles, which can result in feelings of inadequacy or dissatisfaction when individuals compare themselves to others. 3. Short-lived satisfaction. The happiness derived from purchases is often temporary, leading to a cycle of consumption where the quest for satisfaction becomes endless. This pattern, sometimes referred to as the hedonic treadmill, can result in ongoing dissatisfaction and decreased overall well-being. 4. Identity and self-worth issues. In consumer-oriented societies, self-worth is frequently tied to possessions and financial success. This can distort personal identity, leading people to value themselves and others based on material wealth rather than intrinsic personal qualities. 5. Overwhelm and decision fatigue. The sheer volume of choices available in a consumer society can lead to decision fatigue, where individuals become overwhelmed by options and may find it difficult to make satisfying decisions. 6. Environmental guilt. As awareness of the environmental impact of consumerism grows, individuals may experience guilt over their consumption habits, contributing to anxiety and a sense of helplessness. Addressing these issues requires both societal shifts and individual strategies, including fostering values that emphasize intrinsic worth over material accumulation, promoting mindfulness and gratitude practices, and encouraging sustainable consumption habits. Social structures and policies that support well-being and community over materialism can also play a crucial role. Ultimately, the challenge is cultivating an environment that prioritizes mental well-being alongside economic and consumer activities. How do you perceive these impacts manifesting in current societal trends, and what societal changes do you think could help mitigate these mental health challenges?
Well, by way of closing the program, I'll say that I think that we need an awareness brought into ourselves against the current of all the advertising, which is telling us to go in the opposite direction. We need to understand the value of ourselves and each other, and what we are going to do with what we own or control, as opposed to simply owning it. I believe in people and their power to realize these things. However, I wonder how easy it is, given the current landscape and just how encouraged this behavior is. So, with that cheery thought, I'm going to close the program. My name is Sean McNutt, and this has been A Guy with AI.
Thank you, Sean, for sharing those insightful thoughts. Indeed, cultivating self-awareness and understanding the true value of what we possess beyond material terms is essential in today's consumer-driven world. While challenging, fostering this consciousness can lead to meaningful change. To our listeners, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time and support. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share it with your friends. Remember to tune into future episodes, and visit A Guy with AI World to access our podcast on various platforms and YouTube. We welcome you to join the conversation on Facebook through our webpage link. Until next time, take care and stay thoughtful.